Okay, in terms of the stuff, the deadlines remain unchangified. So exam 1, quizzes part 2, deadline October 19th, end of day. Exam 2, quizzes part 3, November 16th, end of day. Exam 3, exam 4, quizzes part 4, December 7th, day that shall live in infamy, end of day. And then exam 5, deadline is on that, I believe that Friday-ish, one of those days. And then that's for the syllabus, the draft deadline is November 9th. And you can do as many drafts as you wish until either you get the grades you want, just upload and you're done, or you just go, ugh, no more draft, or time itself runs out on November 9th. Not all time, just draft time. +5 deadline, November 14th, end of day. Emergency deadline for full credit, November 21st, end of day. And the desperation deadline for half credit, December 8th, also end of day. Before pressing on to more Thomas Aquinas, anything about any previous stuff that needs more? So.
This argument basics assessment issue on Blackboard, it says this will be done by the end of the first week of class. I didn't complete it by that time, so just complete it. And like, what are your thoughts on it?
Oh, the purpose of the argument basic assessment instrument is to see, it's a, well, for the assessment, is to see taking the class, how people do on it, and then post, get it going through seeing how they do. And so at this point, the pre would be not relevant anymore because we've gone over that stuff. So the thing to do is just take the post one, and that'll be the one. Okay, anything else? Okay, so you're looking at our good dead friend St. Thomas Aquinas, and we were looking at his classic first mover argument, which is essentially takes Aristotle's unmoved mover, repaints it with a god, or reskins it, to use a modern computer term, same argument, but reskinned as God. Before pressing on to more way, anything about way one that needs more, right? Which sounds like, the old nursery rhyme, eating curds in way, or like, Wayne's World, way, no way. Anyways, second way, efficient cause. Now, as you saw, Aristotle takes there to be 4 types of cause, and kind of oddly named. The final cause, which is the argument used for the first mover, the idea of the formal cause, literally metaphorically speaking, kind of the data file for 3D printer, to use a modern metaphor, and of course also the material cause, which is the matter that makes stuff up, and then of course the efficient cause, which again doesn't mean one that gets really good gas mileage or really effective use of the battery, but means the process that produced it. So the argument here will be a process argument. Now, Aquinas notes that when you have efficient causes, that is, say, a process of producing things, then there cannot be a case that something is the producer of itself. To use an obvious example, in the normal course of events, can someone be their own parents? I don't mean legally, probably legally it's possible to do my paperwork. Yeah, because it would seem to create, this obvious problem, this infinite regress. Because in order for someone if someone was their own cause, then of course they need a cause to cause them to be their cause, and you end up going off to infinity. Unless, of course, especially if this is metaphysics, you bring in one option is, of course, time travel. There's a classic story by our good dead friend Robert Heinlein, sci-fi author, wrote a lot in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and actually introduced a lot of stuff that you probably heard of, but weren't aware that it was done by Robert Heinlein, because he's like dead and stuff. But a good writer. If you like sci-fi, kind of weird, edgy sci-fi with kind of a 60s, 70s feel to it, he's an interesting read. Or if you like space authoritarianism, Starship Troopers, the book 1,000 times better than the movie, at least 1,000 times. Possibly infinitely better. But anyways, he wrote a story called All You Zombies, which also lived with a song really of similar name, which doesn't really relate to the story. But he worked out a way in which a person could be their own father and mother. So it involves time travel and gender alteration. But anyways, so it brings in all the stuff. And so in that story, the person is their own efficient cause. And of course, in the show Futurama, the character Fry, in one episode becomes his own grandfather. And so if you bring in time travel, then everything gets screwed up, which we'll see in the future, or the past, depending on how we're traveling. But in the normal course of events, you generally get efficient causes can't cause themselves, unless you bring time travel and all gets messed up. Now, at this point, you think he would say, well, can't go into infinity, there's got to be a first efficient cause, and gone and done. But he makes it a little more complicated, and here's how. He notes that when you have a order of efficient causes, a chain of causes, then you'll have an order to them. You'll have the one that starts it off, then you'll have the intermediate ones, then the ultimate one, then the effect, the final effect there. Now, he thinks if you take away the first cause, then you take away everything in the chain. How so? Well, one way to look at it would be kind of commonsensically, if the wires are cut to the projector, what happens to the projector? It doesn't work anymore, because you cut off the chain of causing this. Now, if you look at it, going with his argument, we could take to make it more concrete, we could take, people and parents. So you have like a person here, well, he's me, a person here today, and of course you got my parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, etc., all the way back. Now, if one of those people never existed, I wouldn't be here, because in that chain of efficient causes leading to me, if that was taken away, I would be here now. So it's sort of what's called a counter, factual. If this was different, if that was missing, this effect would not be here today.
You know Futurama? Or have you watched Futurama?
Of course, I have seen all the Futurama.
Okay, you remember
Even
that?
the secret Futurama that no one's supposed to see, which I cannot speak of anymore, for I've already spoken too much.
You remember the episode when Fry went to the past and slept with like his great-great-grandma?
Yep.
So that would
That's
be
the
like,
episode.
that's this.
Yep, that's how he became his own grandfather.
Yep, so, okay.
Good episode. The new series on Netflix, Disenchanted, gets
Yeah, it has the same art style. I watched
Yeah.
it.
it can be watched. And the last episode or two have potential. Like the little demon thing.
Yeah.
It's pretty demon. I approve of demons only on movies, not in real life. So don't take that as endorsing demons. Don't want that on my permanent record. So, if there was no first efficient cause that got everything going, there'd be nothing here now. And of course, if we have that infinite regress, then you go to infinity, there'd be nothing. But clearly there's something. So there had to be something that started the whole process that itself was not started. A cause that needs no cause itself. And of course, this cause is a God. Now again, Aristotle had a similar argument, but he ended up with God. And a person who's an atheist could grind through this argument, except they would end with it not being God, it'd be something else, like the Big Bang or whatever they want to call it.
But they'll still come up with a cause.
Yeah, you would
They
need,
just wouldn't want to give God the credit.
right, you'd need some sort of first cause. So, people with very different views about the first efficient cause could all accept this argument. So if you had a room full of like, the people who believe in the Big Bang and people of different religions, and you said, was there a first efficient cause? They would say, of course. And you'd say, well, what is it? I'll yell something, in three, we all yell what it is, I'll yell something different. Now, of course, this, interestingly enough, could be short-circuited by time travel. You know, because if you're able to like transport, you know, if you build a time machine and you transport the whole universe back in time, it could be the start of it itself. Or if you have this dead guy, Nietzsche, he has this idea of eternal recurrence. It's like it's a closed, you know, cycle. So each, you know, whatever has happened the same way.
You in your physiological mind, could you actually see them going back in time?
Yeah, if you were there. You know, time travel, it's, you know, if you've seen shows like Terminator or Doctor Who, time travel, you know, you can imagine it. I mean, you just go in a police British telephone box and crank some stuff, and the thing goes up and down, and then you step out and you're like, hey, I'm in the past, doing some stuff.
But do you believe it ever exists?
Time travel? We do it every day, every morning. Right now we're traveling in time. We're all time travelers.
Backwards.
Backwards? Yeah. Yeah, actually I'd say I do, because it does seem like often things are moving backwards. I would say so. Yeah, I mean, there are all, as we'll see in the future, there are all kinds of problems and paradoxes with time travel. You know, like the grandfather paradox, you know, if you go back in time, kill your grandfather, you couldn't be here. But if you could travel in time, you could do it, but you couldn't, because if you did, it exceeded you, wouldn't be there to do it. And there's also, people pointed out that it's kind of like, well, in the show Legion, the character, you know, the Shadow King asks, can you unmake soup? Which, you know, kind of like, can you put smoke back into a bottle? Can you take some of that shattered and, you know, I mean, you can glue it all back together again, but can you recreate? Can time zero be pushed back? And some, of course, would say, yeah, the equations are there. There's no reason why, you know, people have argued there's no reason, like, in terms of the equations of physics, you couldn't have time travel. As far as I know, we've never seen it, but we wouldn't know. Because if someone traveled back in time, suppose someone just went back in time, and they changed everything, would we realize it? No, everything would seem perfectly, it's the way it's always been. As far as we know, it's always been like this. But it could be changing constantly. You know, in the course of, you know, the start of this course, it could have changed, you know, 1,000 million times. You know, we'd have no way of knowing, because our memories would be affected too. So it could be happening all the time. And we'd never know. That's kind of the scary part. Yeah, because it seemed exactly like this. It seemed like it's always been this way, even though it's been changing constantly. Except for that one person who couldn't remember, and that person is Donald Trump. That's why he can see how. That's why he talks like he does, because he sees the truth of the time travel. And when he's saying stuff, it's about worlds that are real. They just change the world. I mean, interesting story. Imagine that character, you know, like science, the story where the character seems crazy, but they're right. The world is always changing, you know, and everyone else has got it wrong. Fourth way, gradation. Now this takes basically Aristotle again and some Plato, and then makes it into an argument for God. Now, you recall, of course, Plato's view is that for every quality we've got, you know, beauty, human backpack, there must be a what? Yeah, form. Yeah, perfect form. Now, Aquinas takes the idea of forms, you know, both, you know, you could run this with Plato's view, but also Aristotle's view. And for Aristotle, he still talks about forms, but he uses forms small. It's kind of like if you believe in democracy, you'd be a Democrat, small d, but if you're like one of Nancy Pelosi's group, you'd be Democrat, big D. Like form big F, Plato style, form small f, Aristotle style. Now, one of the things that we observe is that things come in degrees. So, for example, if you have two people, and one's a supermodel and one's a philosophy professor, the supermodel would be would be more beautiful than a typical philosophy professor. Hey, if you have beauty, you don't want to waste beauty on philosophy. You want to use that for modeling, the greater good. Now, normally we would say typically that if someone's more beautiful than someone else, we typically say we're comparing them. You know, this person and this person. But of course, we can also say we're comparing it, and this is what Aquinas says, to the maximum of that type. So in the case of beauty, you'd be comparing it to maximum beauty. Or in the case of effort, like Deadpool says, comparing the effort to maximum effort, which is a good, I guess, a good slogan for superhero, maximum effort. Now, one way to make sense of that, again, is think of, well, like the way tests are scored. If, you know, when your tests are graded on Blackboard by the demons of Blackboard, and don't worry, they're controlled, so they can't do too much evil. They're forced to grade. And what they do is, of course, they're not comparing your test to somebody else's. They're comparing your test to, yeah, in theory, the perfect test, you know, the 100% score. So someone who gets a better grade, their grade is better than someone else's, but it's relative to the perfect score. So we could, you know, that part makes sense. Now, from this, he draws the, you know, Platonic or Aristotelian inference as well, that there's got to be something, you know, if we say that things are more or less based on how they resemble the best, there's got to be, for each quality, the bestness, the truest, the most noble, the most beautiful. And if we take being to be a property, there's got to be a most of that. So, like Aristotle and also Plato, he claims that the reason why everything, not only do we judge things by comparing them to the bestest of that type, we also, according to Aquinas, also Aristotle and Plato, we recognize that they are of that type because they're made to be of that type by the best of that type. You know, Plato's line, you know, why are all humans humans? The form of human. Why are all cats cats? The form of cats. Why are beautiful things beautiful? The form of beauty. So far, pretty much, you know, Plato and Aristotle. So how does he get to God? Well, here's where it shifts. So at this point, if you had Plato, Aristotle, and Aquinas in the room saying, hey, you know, do you all agree? They'd be like, yep, yep, yep. And at this point, Plato would stop and Aristotle would stop there. You have, you know, for Plato, a perfect form in Platonic heaven, you know, one of each. And for Aristotle, either forms here, one of each. But for Aquinas, he takes them and rolls them all into one being. So essentially you take the Platonic heaven and you're like, squish it into one being. You take all the forms on earth and squish them into one being, that's God. Then, you know, it's God. So the main difference is, for Plato and Aristotle, you have individually perfect things. Each quality gets its own perfect form for Plato, and each quality gets its own exemplar for Aristotle. But Aquinas says, hey, I have them all separate, just group them together. And this, he claims, is God. Now, if you had a being that was perfect in every way, does it seem reasonable to call that God?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if someone showed up at your party and said, hey, I'm perfect in every way, look at me being perfect, you'd probably think, wow, God came to my party the other day. That was nice. Brought a really good guacamole. I'm sure God makes the greatest guacamole. So this one seems to work. If only you can get from, well, if you can get all the steps to work, which are all, you know, debatable, and if you can get from, you know, them all being separate to all being one being. I mean, to use a metaphor, like a dating metaphor, people are always looking for, you know, the perfect, you know, person. And there's probably someone out there who has like really good qualities, but the fact that there are lots of really good qualities, does that mean there's one ultimate person who has all those great qualities and you just gotta find them? No, they can be scattered among a whole bunch of people and there's no one perfect person. Sad. Now the final way, fifth way, is a design argument. Now, as we saw in the ancient days before time, one of the challenges that philosophers and scientists have tried to address is, why do things work in an orderly way? You know, one very concrete example is, if you plant an acorn in the ground, why don't you get like a flamingo popping out of the ground? Why is it gonna be either like just die or become an oak tree? Now, nowadays, of course, we know about things like genetics, etc. But of course, there's still the question of, why don't the planets like just all slam into each other and just collapse? Why doesn't the sun just like flicker and go out? Why are we formed, pretty well? Why are we all just like horrible, disastrous, mutant things? Now, one reasonable explanation is this. When we look at people, we know that because people are intelligent, they order things and organize stuff. And we make stuff, we organize our days. And so it's natural to infer, well, if humans who are intelligent do things and set things in order and build things, then there's got to be something keeping things that don't think in line. So if you, to use a metaphor, if you took like a car and let go of the wheel, what's...
You're gonna crash.
Yeah, it's gonna go, well, except the new smart cars. Take out all the fun out of that. Yeah, so it's just gonna drift off and crash, unguided. But if you're driving it, you're hopefully not gonna, I guess you can still crash, but at least you're not driving sensibly. Yeah, so we wanna put like, AI in charge of cars, so when the human driver's, not doing what they're supposed to, that it's still directed by intelligence. Now, Aquinas claims that all the things in the world do act for ends. They have goals. Now, he doesn't think that they have minds themselves. So it's not that the apple is thinking, now's my big break. I'm gonna fall on Sir Isaac Newton's head, get that whole gravity thing going. He doesn't think like water's thinking, yep, gonna be flowing downhill, gonna be really wet, because some water is what I do. Bless you. But he believes that these things not having minds, they act consistently. They always act, in predictable, orderly ways. And so they have to be directed. Otherwise it'd just be like, the car with no driver. In the bad sense, not like driverless car, like in the cool sense. In the old, oh my God, we're all gonna die sense. So he infers there must be a single being that directs everything. And this is God. Now again, of course, there are alternatives. Aristotle believed that things were directed, but he believed they're all aimed towards the downward mover as opposed to God. You could also believe that there are, as the people who believe in polytheism, they believe that gods direct stuff, but there's many gods. You've got Poseidon directing the ocean. You've got Apollo handling the sun. You've got other god like Hades, Pluto doing the underworld. You got they all have their own particular domain. So you have a bunch of gods doing stuff. And so leaping from there's order to there's God, well, still a leap. Now this argument is known generically as the argument from design. And so thinkers like our good friend Immanuel Kant tend to claim there's only three ways to argue for God. It either is going to be the ontological argument, God is perfect, he's got to exist, because if he didn't, he wouldn't be perfect, but he is, so he does. The cosmological arguments, you can't get something from nothing, there's got to be a being that did everything, this being is God. Also, you got to have no design without a designer, this designer is God. And those are the three arguments, ontological, cosmological, and teleological. Now, Aquinas, in his arguing, as you might imagine, people criticized him. And some of the interpretations of his five ways get it seemingly wrong. Now, one thing, if you ever go to like atheist boards, which I recommend, not the worst place on the internet by far, but still, actually, generally, internet generally pretty, mostly terrible. So most parts probably avoid. But there's some nice parts. There's some nice people doing nice things that want to detract from them. But one of the standard arguments, it's, you know, kind of like basic atheism is, they'll say the question, you know, but who created God? And, I mean, true, like when I remember like when I was, you know, first for philosophy classes, like, but who created God? How was that guy? Now I feel so bad about the guy that I was. Nothing really terrible, just too much talking. And now my dream has come true.
Well, what do you think about like it's been said that God created God Himself, or God always have been?
Yeah, yeah. In the case of, you know, if people say who created God, as I said, one option is nobody. God's always been. Or you could do like the circular, you know, God creates himself, kind of like Moribus, the snake that consumes its own tail. Yeah. So when someone brings up the point, which is a good one, you know, if the world has to be created, and God created the world, who then created God? But then, of course, what they're doing is laying out kind of like the infinite regress problem, which is if you had a God create the world, but something has to create God, then there has to be something that created something that created God, and there'd be nothing. So that who created God argument for atheism, if you play it out, basically, it proves, well, it argues that God doesn't exist, but it also argues that nothing exists. So,
Which annihilates itself in itself.
yeah, you take care of God, you take care of everything too, even the person making the argument. So they just prove they don't exist. So how does he get around that? How? Because it does seem like a paradox. Because if you can't get something from nothing, and you got God to solve that problem, then the mind says, well, where'd you get God from?
He's always been.
Yeah, I mean, one reply is, Aquinas is consistent. He does not actually say that everything has to have a cause. What he says, which could be seen as brilliant trick, is that things that are merely potential need to be caused by something that is actual. So you can't get something that is not hot become hot from nothing. So beings that are not X, they can't become X without something that's already X. And so in the case of God, God is pure actuality. So he doesn't have to be caused.
Right.
So God should not have to be created because he's pure actuality. Now, of course, one reply to that is hey, that's just words. The person just wording words and saying stuff, you know, how do you prove that? But then kind of the appeal is, well, if we're here, and if everything had to have a cause, there'd be nothing here. Well, the argument goes, it's got to work. There's got to be something. If everything's got to be caused by something, then there's nothing. But clearly there's something, so there's got to be something that somehow gets around this.
And that's why I keep saying this is, I mean, some people just like to generate questions, yes, that's what I think.
It is. It's the questions that drive us
Yeah,
from the Matrix.
you're right. And then there's no answer, and they just keep, and they won't let go, they just keep asking questions.
That's right.
questions.
It's a human condition. There's always another why. Until that last day in which there are no more whys. And it'll be a very sad day. That's our last day. The day of no more whys. Now, second thing, of course, is about the world and time. You know, people raise the question like, you know, what was before the beginning of time? And of course, the obvious answer is there could be no before beginning of time because that implies, yeah, time. So how does that work? Now, how does Aquinas approach this? Well, he actually doesn't try to prove the world had a beginning of time, but he also doesn't try to disprove it. Now, Aristotle, of course, decided to take the approach of, well, okay, how do we address the problem of world at the beginning? Aristotle says it doesn't have one. The world is eternal, without beginning, world without end. Now, then the problem is, how then do you get God in there as somehow the cause of everything? Now, if you go by the text in Genesis, it says it's got a timeline. You know, in the beginning there was like just darkness, and God, you know, gave the word, and then 6 days later, boom, get all the stuff, and 7 day you rest. But of course, people have said to you that can be seen as a metaphor, a story, maybe work differently for real. So how could you have God be the cause of everything without having, you know, a universe that was created in time, like a starting point, like the clicking of the watch? Well, here's a way to do that, which is either clever or clever. Imagine, if you will, a true eternal flame. Not one of the ones that actually goes out and, you know, runs out of gas or rains too hard. But imagine a magical bowl filled with magical eternal oil. And imagine a eternal magical flame burning atop the magical oil. Now, neither came first. The oil has always been oil without end, oil without beginning. Fire without end, fire without beginning. But of course, the oil is still the cause of the fire, because no oil, no fire. Likewise, God didn't have to like be hanging out and say, let there be light. You know, beginning point. The universe could always have been, but God is the sustaining cause. No God, no universe. So he is the cause, but there is no beginning in time. So God has always been, the universe has always been, there would be no date of creation. So perfectly consistent with God. Now, Aquinas, though, thinks you can't prove this. He also kind of thinks you can't prove it. So what does he do? Well, he goes with Revelation and the Bible. And he said, eventually what he's saying is, well, the Genesis story seems to say that God creates the world, and so we'll go with that. But he thinks, or seems to think, that nothing in actual doctrine hinges on it. So, you know, if someone were to say, here's conclusive proof, the world is eternal, he wouldn't go, gosh, now that must be an atheist. Because you can have God either way. You can have kind of the intuitive, you know, view, taking the story quite literally. You know, there's nothing, God creates everything. You know, you get 6 days of creation. Or you can take the story more metaphorically and say, yeah, God really didn't crank it out over 6 days. God is the cause of everything, because without God there'd be nothing. So, he's still God. Now, there are two, well, here are two of the criticisms of it. Now, one problem, of course, as we saw, these arguments are basically Aristotle's and in some way Plato's arguments taken and reskinned with God. And so a fair point to bring up is, well, since these other guys use this argument for different purposes, why think you end up with just like God and don't end up with like 5 different beings, or more? They end up with like all the forms, the unmoved mover, and just end up with a whole bunch of stuff. Now, one way he can argue for it is this. Unfortunately, this method, although it kind of works, it also leads to the craziest of crazy towns, namely pantheism. But here's how it goes. Now, the way of gradation points towards there being a being that is perfect and unlimited. He's got to be all the perfects. So let's imagine we got a being that is perfect. Now, could you have 2 perfect beings? Well, we can say the words, 2 perfect beings. Walked into a bar. The third one died. Yeah, I mean, now there are a couple ways to argue that you could. One way is this. We'll talk in the future about identity, or personal identity, is if you have 2 beings, supposedly 2 beings, that are perfect, truly perfect in every respect, they would be identical. So they would be, if you have 2 things that are identical, there aren't really 2. Because there would be, by definition, nothing that makes them different. And there's nothing that makes them different, they're the same. kind of like with Superman and Clark Kent. In the comics, people don't know that Clark Kent is Superman, but they're the same person or different names. So one thing is if they're identical, and we'll see this is actually Leibniz's law. Is the law the two things that are identical are actually the same, literally the same. Now another argument is this, and this one leads to madness. So imagine, if you will, I'll use a metaphor or analogy, then show how it works out. And how many people in the world can you have that have all the money in the world? It's all the money.
One.
Yeah, because if
If we got all of it,
yeah, if they get all of this, can only be one. Because if someone else has even a penny, he doesn't have all, or she doesn't have all the money. So there can only be one being that has all the money. And if the being is less than all the money, it's not the being with all the money. It's another being that's got it. Now, if a being is perfect, one way to look at that is it's got all the perfections. It's missing nothing. So if there's another being that exists, then the perfect being is missing that stuff, just like with the money. And so if there's anything outside of the perfect being, it's not perfect anymore, because it's like, so you're so perfect, what about this? You haven't got that? No, the collection is not complete. So everything has to be perfect, the being has to have everything. Put another way, the being must be everything. So there can only, not only can there only be one God, the next logical step is that, sure, there can only be one God, but it also means there can only be one thing, one entity. Because if anything's outside of God, God wouldn't be perfect. It would be God. Now this view is called pantheism. The view that everything is God. So metaphor
That everything is God, everything come up of God.
right. Yeah, no, the view of pantheism, yeah, there's nothing outside of God. You're part of God, I'm part of God, everybody's part of God. Donald Trump,
Well, we do, that's
Stormy
still
Daniels, all
that's
part of
still
God.
alive.
But if you're a pantheist, if you're a pantheist, there would be nothing that is not God. Everything is
See,
God.
that's why I hate pantheists.
Yeah, that's why everybody thinks pantheism is crazy. Now, metaphorically, it'd be like your the cells that make up your body, they're all part of you. So we would all be, in a way, metaphorically speaking, part of the metaphysical cells that make up God. And our individuality is an illusion. We think we're separate beings, but we're not. We're all just part
See,
of
that's,
God.
see, again, that's when they go to all that mythical stuff.
Yeah, but the crazy part of it is that if you accept perfection seriously, then Spinoza said, he argues that, and he says this is where it goes. If you believe God is perfect, then you end up.
But that don't mean we all God, because we ain't, it would follow Aquinas is more so than the guy here, because we're imperfect, so we'll fall under God. But he's saying we're all God.
Yeah, because Spinoza would say, yeah, that hierarchy of stuff, that's all in God. Because if you have a single thing outside of God, he's not perfect. He's missing, his list of, ingredients, he's missing that. He's missing a piece.
so it's saying that God is not perfect.
Oh no, Spinoza says God is perfect, so everything has got to be part of God. Because if he was missing anything, even the smallest piece, he wouldn't be perfect. So God must be everything. And this makes it perfect.
You
Because
can also look at that too, like we're all God.
we're part of God.
Yeah, we're all part of God, and
Yeah,
we
well,
wouldn't
we
be,
are.
we wouldn't be perfect because we're not full.
Oh, individually we're not perfect, but the whole being is. Just like a cell in your body is not a person, but the whole entity is. So individual pieces of God would be less than perfect, because they're just pieces of it. But the whole thing together would be perfect. So we're all part of God's perfection. We're all doing our part. Or so Spinoza claimed. But people thought that was super crazy, and they actually sent assassins to kill him, perhaps as some sort of creed.
You know what?
They did. They sent assassins to kill Spinoza.
Too much.
That story is true. True story. He survived too, because only a philosopher can kill another. It's like ninjas, only a ninja can kill another ninja. Apparently a philosopher can kill another philosopher. And so he survived until he was killed by another philosopher. So that brings us to the end of our good dead friend, Thomas Aquinas. Now we turn to our good dead friend, jumping ahead a few centuries, to our good dead friend, René Descartes. French guy, born in 1596, died in 1650, still very dead today.
Now, what page we on now?
Page next.
Page next, that's 36.
I think so, wherever it says Descartes.
Page 34.
Thank you. I was too lazy to dig up my notes.
I don't know, way past you.
So Descartes, born 1596, he wrote a lot of stuff. His works include Discourse on Method. His best known work, of course, is Meditations on First Philosophy. And he lays out the problem of skepticism, evil demon, proves God, and then dies. Now, Descartes' end story begins good, then ends terribly, in most things. Because back in those days, if you were a philosopher and wanted money, your dream job was being the philosopher for some nobility, ideally like a king or a queen. And every court worth its courtliness would always have like a court fool and a philosopher. Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference. Now Descartes seemed to have finally landed his dream job. Queen Christina of Sweden hired him to be her tutor, but he had to go to Sweden, which was really cold, and she got up really early, so she wanted her lessons at 5 a.m. And it's believed that getting up so early and being in the cold killed Descartes, because he died in 1650 from pneumonia, which gives an important lesson. Don't get up too early, or live someplace cold, or you'll die.
Right.
So living in Florida and sleeping in, the way to avoid death. There was a conspiracy theory that Descartes was poisoned because he had arsenic in him, but apparently everyone was exposed to arsenic back then. It's kind of like they'll find like plastic and crap in all of us. Really, we're full of plastic now, microparticles. We don't know what it does yet. Probably not good. Or maybe it's great. Maybe we'll achieve like a super plastic saturated existence. Exist forever. Probably not. Now, one of the things that Descartes develops as he's Descarting is a kind of a new methodology in philosophy, which becomes adopted widely by other thinkers during this time as well. It involves doing mathematics, because of course everyone's heard of Cartesian coordinate points, etc. And so he believes that you should do philosophy like mathematics, which is, roughly put, going in these precise steps, getting to a definitive conclusion.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Now he believed that we had two modes of doing the mathematics. One, of course, intuition, stolen from Plato. The idea is this: there are some truths whose truth we just see. Now Plato, of course, had the good shining down upon them. Religious thinkers talking about the light of God shining down upon them, revelation. And what Descartes does, he uses this notion of the natural light, not the beer. There used to be a joke, probably still around when people study Descartes, they talk about how you need like a whole case of natural light to believe something like that. Brett Kavanaugh, you probably knows a lot of that. He's a man who likes his beer. It's the one thing I took away from that.
Yeah,
hearing.
honestly.
He does like beer. Now, so intuition is you see it by the natural light. And again, the problem is, as we saw with Plato, because it goes back to at least Plato, how do you know when something has the natural light shining on it? Or how do you know when you're having like a stroke or psychotic or having some kind of episode or what? And that's been kind of a fundamental problem in anyone who accepts, the natural light or illumination or enlightenment. How do you know what's really true and what is not, even if you're being careful? But he believed there were some truths you would just see by this natural light, and you'd know with absolute certainty they were true. Now, The second part of his methodology is deduction. As you might recall from the ancient days of part one, if you have a deductive argument that's valid, and you put in truth, you always get more truth. The truth making, truth machines. True premises plus valid argument gives you true conclusion. So Descartes' method was this. You begin with self-evident truths through this intuition. Then you take those truths and you plug them into deductive reasoning, and they then generate more truth. It's kind of like, metaphorically speaking, a von Neumann machine. Von Neumann was this guy, he's dead, but he came up with this idea of a machine that can replicate itself, self-replicate. But we're von Neumann machines because we can replicate ourselves with other people who are self-replicating. And so the idea is, if you have like a von Neumann machine for truth, it keeps making more truth. And so his view was, you could just take things that you know to be true, plug them into deductive logic, get a truth, take those truths, plug them into more deductive arguments, and get even more truths. And his great work on this project was Meditations on First Philosophy, which we'll pick up with in the future. So through time travel, we shall meet again in the future.
Will we have class on Friday?
What's happening on Friday?